So, in the spirit of not running into Doug Bibby's time, so I'm scared to death of that guy. And also
that will clear the room.
giving the maximum amount of time to Woody Nash to give his presentation on automated parking. Let me just briefly introduce Woody. He is the president of Gotham Parking and lives in northern New Jersey. His practice is national, and he's helping us through the transition from the old way of parking to the new way of parking. Again, he lives in northern New Jersey. His practice is national and is a graduate of Rollins College. Woody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Robert, for inviting me to speak here today, and I will try to keep this brief. Got a lot to fit in here in 20 minutes, so we're going to move along pretty quickly. Let me just take a quick poll here in the room. Who in the room has seriously considered automated parking for a project that they were building? Okay, that's pretty good show of hands. If I can, just real quickly, throw out 3 words that come to mind for you when you think about automated parking, just real quick.
Mechanical failure.
Pardon?
Mechanical failure.
Mechanical failure?
Expensive.
Expensive?
Permanent.
Permanent. Okay, great. Thanks. Let's real quickly just have a baseline understanding of what is automated parking. So this is not automated parking, this is mechanical parking. And the differentiation is that mechanical parking requires a human valet to move the cars in and out of the systems. You see these all over the streets in New York City. They're operated typically with hydraulics. And that is not what I'm going to talk about here today, although it is something that I do sell into the marketplace. But today we're going to talk about automated parking systems. And there are 4 primary systems for automated parking design. The first on the upper left-hand corner is what we would call a rolling tower crane. Okay, a rolling tower crane was adopted from warehousing systems and is guided by a rail that's mounted in the floor and in the ceiling. It moves back and forth and picks cars out of the parking bay where you enter the system, sort of like a single car garage with some sensors in it. And that device will actually come down, remove the car from the parking bay, and then go sideways and up and down in the same motion on one device, and then deposit the car into a shelf, right, which is the storage area of the garage. And actually, I believe this is the same type of system that, Robert, you had put in down in Washington, D.C., right?
At Grand Park.
Yep, at Grand Park in 2002. So the systems here have some pros and some cons, and you'll find that of all the systems in the marketplace. The pro for this system is that it is really fast for a single retrieval. The problem with it is that it only picks one car at a time, so it does what we call serial processing rather than simultaneous processing. If you have 5 people coming to the garage at one time, a queue will form instantly, and the system will have to work through those retrievals or inbound parking transactions. The good news about this system is that it's one device primarily to maintain, right? So that's a simpler thing about it. The bad news is that if it breaks, right, then the entire garage is shut down, right? That's why typically you see this system being implemented in New York City, where if you can't get your car, you can go to a street corner and get to anywhere in the world from that street corner. It works there. Out in suburban New Jersey, maybe not so much, right? And so you do see that problem with these systems. Because there's only one mechanism, it does make it a little bit more cost effective, but in terms of space, it's not so cost effective because you have that whole atrium in the middle that's essentially wasted, right? And by the way, historically, I think this is changing, fire departments really hated that atrium because they kept envisioning running in there to put out a fire and falling down into the atrium. I think we've gotten past that issue by and large in most major markets, but it is still a concern and a factor because there is no building code for automated parking systems. So the next system which evolved is a rail-guided system as well, and it's what we would call a lift and shuttle system. And this system has the benefit of now being able to simultaneously retrieve. These shuttles are mounted that you see there to rails on the front of the rack on each level of the garage. And you can simultaneously retrieve cars on different levels. So back to our prior example, if there are 5 levels in the garage and 5 people come to the garage at the same time and we get lucky and they all happen to be on different levels, and hey, we can start retrieving all 5 of those vehicles at the same time. That's great. Of course, if they're all on the same level, just because it's the luck of the draw and people come back randomly, well, you're going to have queue again, right? But it is better and it increases the odds for you. The challenge with these systems is that because there's a shuttle moving this way and the lifts are stationary, there has to be a handoff. So if I go to bring a car out of the parking bay, and now I have to slide over to the lift, I have to push it into the lift, I have to then go up to the level, and then another shuttle has to receive it on the other level. So not only is there mechanical time for those handoffs, but you also have to coordinate. So the lift has to be in place waiting, right? Or else that shuttle is now tied up waiting for the lift. And then when the lift goes up to the upper level, a shuttle has to be there waiting, or else the lift is out of commission until a shuttle's there for it, right? So it's a little bit inefficient in terms of speed of processing, but you do have greater redundancy. The other thing is if the shuttle breaks down, right, then the entire garage is hampered. It's not necessarily put out of commission. The only time that would happen is perhaps if one of the shuttles on the ground floor broke, right, that could become a bottleneck for the entire system. It is a cost-effective system typically, although there is a little bit more machinery involved. And you again have this atrium problem where you've got this empty space, firefighters don't like it, and you're not parking any cars in that empty space. So I was most recently at Boomerang before I started Gotham Parking Systems, and I was really part of 2 people that invented this idea, which is AGV parking. Boomerang calls theirs the robotic valet. And it's distinct from the other systems in that it is rolling across a solid concrete slab, right, which makes for easier construction. You don't have that void that you have to support structurally. But then additionally, the cars are all parked on trays. As you can see there, they all are about 1 foot off the ground. And those robots travel underneath parked cars. The advantage of that is if there's a mechanical failure, right, the other robots can just go around the dead robot and continue to function, right? So there is really no material impact to a mechanical failure of a particular robot. And that is a big improvement in terms of the performance of these systems. It's also got a benefit that, if we all have flying cars 25 years from now, right, and we're not doing as many traditional parking garages, if you built the space with enough height to begin with, you could possibly repurpose that space for some other use, because it's a solid concrete slab again. That's another benefit of it. This system does still struggle with the handoff issue, because just like in the other systems, it has to pass it to the lift, and then another robot has to be there to take it when it comes off the lift, or the robot has to travel with the car up to the floor. And you have this possibility of a whole bunch of robots collected on the top floor of the garage that you now have to redistribute using the lifts, right? So either way, you still have this handoff issue within the garage. The main problem with these systems is that there's not a significant track record. The first one of these opened very large garage in Miami at Brickell House Condominiums, it's 480 cars, and they are using it for public and resident use, but I would say that it is not fully operational at this point. So it's being used and being tested and being refined, I guess you'd say, in the field. But there needs to be a longer track record with this technology. I think a lot of people would say that it holds the most promise for automated parking, especially on large-scale projects, right? Where you're talking about a 1,000-car garage. Those steel racks that I showed you, the first 2 systems, are a little hard to imagine on that scale. Whereas when you have solid concrete slabs, if anything breaks, you just walk out into the middle of the big garage and you fix it. So it's a little bit better for large-scale projects. There is also a system that's popular in Europe. It's now making its way here into the United States. It's puzzle parking. And essentially, all the other systems that I showed you had sort of domed storage areas, right? So that the cars were placed down and there was no machinery in the place that the cars are stored. And then automation would come and lift the car and bring it down. Well, this system works differently in that the entire storage area is actually activated. It has motors, and you see the wheels. It's a little bit hard to see, but along the edge of the orange tray, you see little round wheels there. That's because the entire storage area is capable of propelling the cars from one space to the next. And just like the game we used to play when we were kids, where there's like one empty space and you're able to reorder the numbers, these systems work in the same way. So you get the most density through the use of these systems. You really can get down to about 190 square feet per car, whereas a traditional automated parking system might be more like 240, valet might be 260, and then conventional is anywhere from 325 to 450, right? So this system will get you unparalleled density. The only problem with it is it doesn't really get economies of scale because every space is automated, right? So if you're building a 1,000-car garage, it's almost the same price as if you're building a 33-space garage. It does actually price out very well, sort of below 300 spaces and down. You know, it's competitive in that environment, and then it really doesn't scale as well as some of the other systems for big garages. So the big question is, why use automated parking? For those of you who are not initiated in it, the sort of headline to this is that it can reduce the parking volume by up to 60%. Not every garage, that's true. If we're being compared to a highly efficient, what I would call Kansas cornfield garage, where you have perfect geometry, and you can build a double T precast garage, and it's only 325 square feet, well, of course, we're not going to have a 60% gain in efficiency in that situation. I'm really talking about underneath a tower in a city where the columns are coming down through, and you've got the cores, and you've got all sorts of other stuff interfering with the efficiency of the parking garage. This garage here could easily be 425 square feet per space, right? The other thing is, you know, these garages will impact the cityscape, right? Cities are now sort of banning this kind of construction. They don't want these big podium garages with no retail in front of it. The place just clearly feels creepy at night, right? And they would like to see a more active streetscape. So it's hard to do that and to have a conventional garage. But the main thing is about reclaiming FAR. So if we go back to, you know, if I was able to shrink the garage, you know, size by 60%, we'll walk through a little example here. Let's assume a 500-car garage in this case, right? And we have the hard cost for an automated garage and a self-park garage. We're talking about getting 200 square feet of efficiency in the automated garage and 425 square feet of efficiency in the self-park garage. So if the costs are about the same, let's just call it $35,000 a space under a tower. Of course, parking could be cheaper if you're doing that precast garage I described earlier. But under a tower, I think these are pretty reasonable numbers for you to assume. This is going to create a gain of 112,500 square feet of, you know, new space effectively that you found on your site, right? And if we could, you know, then turn that space, you look at your incremental profit margin on that buildable area, right? Anywhere from 100 to 300, you're talking about a net profit of anywhere from $11 million to $33 million, right, of increased profit through this use of automated parking. Right now, this doesn't apply to every job. For this to really work, parking needs to count against your FAR, where you have to have a height restriction, right? Where you know, put in the garage in terrible soil conditions where you don't want to dig, right? In those particular situations, you'll see these kind of economic benefits, right? There are few and far between, but we look hard for them because that's where automated parking becomes a quote-unquote no-brainer, right? You can become very comfortable all of a sudden with risk and permanence and obsolescence because you're talking about improving the economics of the project pretty significantly. So another reason we get brought in is because there's painful excavation and foundation work that needs to be done. And so by shrinking the size of the garage again up to 60%, we're taking out the most expensive and most painful levels of the garage. You still may need to dig a basement, but you're going to not have to maybe underpin to the neighboring building. Or there's other things that could be avoided and accelerate your construction timeline, get your building rented up faster, right? That's like found money. If I can, get your building open 3 or 4 months earlier, that just fell out of the sky, right? And so we look at that very carefully when we're looking at these kind of projects. You can also earn LEED points. Obviously, parking itself cannot be LEED, right? But as part of your project, right, that has other uses, you can get LEED points through the use of automated parking in your garage. You're reducing the exhaust. You don't have the same mechanical ventilation needs that are running, throughout the day. And lighting as well is greatly reduced. You're also theoretically using less building materials in the process. It's an improved user experience. There's all sorts of ways that you can get LEED credit for it. But what's really driving the market today is that this is being viewed as the ultimate high-tech luxury amenity. right? So this is a Zaha Hadid building, the related building in New York City, right? It's got an automated parking system in it. In Miami, I'm told that it's effectively kind of a must-have item in a condo project down there. You know, it is used in like multifamily as well, and it really just gives you a way. I mean, look, everybody has the same marble countertops and the same elliptical machines and a pool, right? You can put in the dog washing station, but how are you going to differentiate your product? Well, right now, automated parking is a way to really separate your product. I live in New Jersey, and there's a lot of projects in Jersey City that have like 9-level garages that you have to drive through, and you can hear the tires squealing as people are going around and around looking for a space where they know they're not going to get the door dented in. You know, so it's really not a pleasant experience for people. And if you fast forward 10 years, you have the same 2 towers, right, with 500 car parking systems. One has a ramp and roam garage, I call it. The other has a pull off the street, white glove valet experience with automation, except you don't have to hand your keys over to a guy in a bow tie. You actually get to keep your keys, you know, lock up your Tesla and go up to your apartment with your groceries. Which building do you think is going to have higher rents, right, at that point? Assuming that the technology is working and working well for you, I think it's going to be the automated parking system. It's a better experience for the user and thus seen as a luxury item. So why has U.S. adoption been slow? I'm going to kind of clip through these, but when it started out, they were all overseas suppliers, right? So people said, wow, that's just a lot of risk. I don't speak German. You know, I hear they don't work in August. You know, I'm not really wanting to take that on. Then you had an issue of the software, which quickly came up in a project here in the U.S. that had difficulties. Who owns the software? What's that license? Is it in escrow? What if they go bankrupt? Like, there was all these issues, and it's like, hey, look, I'm a developer, right? I barely understand the wiring in my buildings. I do not need to take on software, you know, risk as well. That has subsequently been resolved a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, the firefighters, right, or were rightly so very concerned about this. They've never seen anything like this in their buildings. We tend to want to go in. The first reflex of the firefighter is I have to get in there, right, and put out the fire, right? Well, it took them a little while to realize that this is unoccupied space. There's nobody to save, right? You put sprinklers in there, you put fire separation between the parking cavity, the rest of the building. You can just let it burn out, right? You don't have to run in there and try to save people. So now the fire approvals are getting a lot easier. There were a lot of concerns, and this remains a concern today, and rightly so, right? Automated parking is not right for every type of project, right? About queuing and waiting times. The cities worry about queuing, trying to get into the garage, right? And you as the developers are concerned about the waiting times for the customers, right? I mean, you have to wait 11 minutes outside of New York City. 11 minutes in New York City is a home run. You just did really well. But anywhere else in the country, 11 minutes would be unacceptable, and it might hurt your ability to rent those units, right? So people are very concerned about that user experience, and rightly so. This is how banks saw automated parking, right? So given all the other things that I said earlier, you know, they said, well, you know, you can do it with your money, but you're not doing it with my money, right? And I think, you know, that led to people who were worried that the Donald would show up and deliver them the message if they were the guy that put in the automated parking system that didn't work, right? And they're just seen as unnecessary career risk, right? I'll put a 9-level ramp and roam garage in and forget about, you know, trying to do something progressive. So the good news is that it's now safe to get back into the water, or, you know, to use automated parking. The market is taking off. On the left-hand side, you can't see it because it's hard on the screen, but there are 13 projects that I counted. Certainly some I probably missed here that are completed and operational here in the United States. There are another 13 that are under construction right now. So you can see there's a lot of velocity, obviously tied to the building cycle. But there are probably, I say 12 plus projects, I think it's probably more like 20 that are very close to breaking ground that I know of, and there's a lot that I don't know of. So I think you're seeing now that the banks and the fire and, you know, all the issues that I mentioned are now being resolved. The foreign companies are now setting up subsidiaries so you can directly contract with the manufacturers, and it's becoming a more mature and stable marketplace. So these projects are making it now easy for you as you look in research projects to find reliable vendors, right? To get your lender to be comfortable, to get the project approved and not be at risk of undesirable delays, right? And then to tap and realize that profit potential that I mentioned earlier. Every good project really needs to have a feasibility analysis done, and to simplify that greatly, there's three primary things in a feasibility analysis. The density, right? How much space am I going to actually save you through using it? The cost, right? Versus whatever other costs that you have a conventional or valet system that you're analyzing. And then VPH is an easy way to fit on that ball, the word throughput, right? Which is often used in our industry to talk about how many cars per hour can I get in and out of the system. Right, given the trip generation report that you'll have for your project. Right, all of that kind of comes into a stew, and out comes your feasibility decision. They also kind of compete against each other. So if I'm going to increase the density, I might decrease the vehicles per hour because it's a more congestion inside the garage. Right, and if I increase or I decrease the density, I could increase the cost. Right, because I have to put in more equipment in there. So. A little bit more about throughput, and this is really important for you. I can't begin to get into it in any level of detail that I should here, but you need to understand some basic things about this. If you look at that garage, right, and you say, how am I going to get to the car in the back row? The first thing you'll notice is that there are no empty spaces, right? So if I'm going to pull a car out, this one's designed, as you can tell, because it's got the empty atrium there, for either a tower crane system or a lift and shuttle system. So you look at that and you start thinking, well, okay, I'm going to be like a kid here. I'm going to move the first car, and you say, well, where am I going to put it? Well, this was done by an architect. No offense to architects, but they did not know to leave empty spaces on this, right? So they need to leave some empty spaces to be able to move the cars into, right? And if you think now about, I got to go back and move the second car and then go to the third car, you realize that this is a developer that maybe is really trying to push the envelope of what is a proper design for an automated parking system, because he's parking 3 deep in a residential building, right? And I would really need to see the trip generation report to feel comfortable with this kind of density for that kind of system, right? The more dense it is, right, that will lead to longer wait times, right? And then the wait times will increase as the occupancy level increases as well. So that means as a garage reaches, starts getting empty, right, the percentage likelihood that I'm going to have to move another car to get to the target vehicle reduces, right? So if I get this garage particularly to 33% occupancy, right, I can get any car without having to move any other car. If it cranks up to 50% occupancy, right, then it's a higher likelihood I'm going to have to move a car to get to the target vehicle. That's pretty much my point. The more complex you make it, right, with vehicle sizes, then the longer your wait times are going to be. And then when you have a system that has handoffs between the equipment, right, that's going to make it increase as well. I put together some keys here for picking an automated parking system. I'm going to run through them pretty quickly and then open it up if there are any questions. This seems pretty logical, but believe it or not, I've seen a lot of people take systems that have never been deployed in the field, and they're doing R&D in the field. So look for a vendor with 10 plus years of experience, 10 plus projects done, right? Then look for proven technology that's been in the field for at least 10 years, right? So that's easy to remember, 10 and 10, right? Choose a vendor and get them integrated early in the design process, right? So you don't have designs put out to bid in the market like the one that I showed you earlier. You have one that's actually properly designed for the application. Contract directly with the manufacturer, not with a local distributor. I'm a sales agent, right? Anything I sell, you're dealing directly with my manufacturer, not with me, right? And if anything goes wrong in an automated parking project, you want to have the the manufacturer on the hook. By the way, most GCs don't want to touch this, so it's going to be a prime contract direct to the developer. Make sure the system can handle the peak demand. I've talked about that. Make sure you're clear about what the performance needs to be in terms of vehicles per hour, right? And then have clear acceptance testing at the end of the project. So you can say, with a stopwatch, all right, it's doing what you said it would do, right? It's pretty simple, but it's not often done. Define the responsibilities, right? So who's putting in the sprinkler system, and what do you need to provide in terms of electricity? Make sure that the other trades don't get in the way of the automated parking system. Very few automated parking companies are going to be able to put up a bond, right? So you're going to have to make progress payments to them. There are ways to mitigate your risk and make your bank happy with all of that, but you need to be thinking that through in advance and making sure that you're being comfortable through that entire process. You also really do need to keep your manufacturer happy. You know, the old saying, happy wife, happy life, right? You're in many ways, you know, marrying this automated parking system because they are the people who have the software, they know how to make it work. So luckily, if they have a long track record, you can talk to lots of their clients and find out that they take good care of their customers. But ultimately, you don't want to play games with your automated parking vendor, right? Because they kind of have the keys to keeping your garage running. And I will just say that it's important to have a good working relationship with them. So that's it. I got it in as quickly as I could. There's my contact information. Any questions? I did a great job. All right. Thank you for your time.
I'll throw that real quick.
Oh, I can email them.
Bye. Doug? You're not even going to introduce me? I'd like to introduce Doug Bibby. Doug's the President and CEO of the National Multi-Housing Council, and he's going to talk to us about what's going on in the Hill. He's right there. He's been pretty active here the last month or two, and you have 15 minutes to go for it, Doug.
And apparently Shaker and Sharon both had root canals, and I was the only one that did not have a root canal.
He was the only one brave enough to talk about it.
And David, if you thought your table was a Debbie Downer, we'll let you through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative environment and then more about the regulatory environment because that's where the action is. Last year, the Senate passed out of committee a bill, bipartisan, 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats,